Yeah.
Perfect. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thanks for having me. It's Peter, you do such a great job of setting this up. We've had some great conversations and connections already. It's pretty neat. And I usually tell a bit about my story. We don't have time because I want to get into some valuable content, but I just want to let you know I teach a lot about leadership because leadership is difficult for me. And there's a long dramatic story I have about suffering from massive imposter syndrome. When I started my business, we had some success. I was in my mid-30s. Next thing you know, I had my payroll in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. I was on the front page of the newspaper. We were so successful, but I was riddled with self-doubt, with guilt, with imposter syndrome. And there's a long dramatic story that has to do with divorce, substance abuse. I had a business partner assault me, restraining orders, lawsuit. We don't got time for that. You got to wait for the Netflix special, or to go on YouTube. It's all on YouTube. And that's where I made my transformation. But everything that I teach is based on one simple concept, and it's something that you can use right now. And I'm gonna, let me just pull up my chat because I'm gonna ask you a chat question or two. The consciousness is broken into, you can think of it as broken into two different areas: the ego and the authentic self. And you've probably heard these terms before, but I want to give you definitions because ego has different definitions depending on what school of psychology you're following right now. But the authentic self is our natural state. We're in our authentic self when we're feeling safe. And that is our natural state. But neurologically, there's a thing called an amygdala, which is a part of the brain right in the middle. It's about an almond-sized shape. And then it's always looking for threats. And anytime it sees a threat, it sends a message to the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland. And that sends chemicals into our body, like adrenaline and cortisol, that change our body composition at that time when it perceives that there's a threat. And so, and then that moves us into our ego, because we're in our ego when we have to protect ourselves. And so it's actually a physiological reaction when that puts us into our ego. You'll know this because if you were ever in that is fight or flight. That's fight, flight, or freeze. Actually, there's three of them, Philip. But you're exactly right. That's where fight, flight, or freeze comes from, being in the ego and these chemicals in our body. And you'll know this because if you were ever in a car on one of your crazy M25s or A3s or whatever it is, and you're in there, whether you're driving or not, and somebody just about cuts you off, and you think for that split second you're going to die, and then whoa, and then all of a sudden you see you're going to be okay, and you're safe again, but you still are like wired, right? That's because of the chemicals in your body. Now, for Fiona, I'd add faint. I get you. Now the thing is, for the last 20,000 years, we've really had to physically fight to protect ourselves, whether it's from T-Rexes or warring tribes. For the last couple of generations, we really didn't need to physically protect ourselves. But the thing is, it's the same fight, flight, or freeze reaction. It's the same amygdala. It's the same everything else that doesn't know the difference between fighting a man-eating dinosaur or a woman-eating dinosaur, or being in a boardroom, for example, and the chairman of the board asks you a question you're not ready for. It's the same fear-based reaction. Now, what I want you to do is as I'm asking this next question, I want you to chat what poor leadership traits are. What do poor leadership, when you see something, oh, that's poor leadership, type that into the chat, because I want to talk, as you're doing that, I want to talk about what the ego does. The ego's job is to protect you. You're in your ego because you perceive that you're being threatened. And your ego's job is comfort, to make you comfortable, control everything, because you need to control things so you don't die, it perceives, right? And then security, so it wants to make you secure. Now, let's look at what people are typing down for this. Not listening, blame, deflecting, dictating, arguing, micromanagement, arrogance, over-controlling, telling rather than asking, top down, no autonomy for team, bad temper, not serving, hypocritical, Teflon suits. Do you see how all poor leadership traits are by people in their ego? That is all protection-based. when you're hypocritical, you're doing that because you think you need to protect yourself. When you're top down, when you're very autocratic, that's because you're trying to protect yourself. You don't feel safe. When you try to control, or you're arrogant. People that are shy, shyness and arrogance both come from ego-based behavior. You're shy because you don't want to put yourself out there. You're arrogant because you're going to go on the offense because you don't trust people. So you're going to go on the offense so you don't have to play defense. Micromanaging is a form of control. So all poor leadership is based on people being in their ego, people not feeling safe. And, they definitely don't want to let you know they don't feel safe. That would be too vulnerable for them, but that's where poor leadership comes from. Now, type in, you did a great job on that. Type in what great leadership is. This is what great leaders do. Because when you're not in your ego, first of all, you can either be in your ego or your authentic self. You can never be in both at the same. It's like a dial. Like I can be further in my ego. I can be further in my authentic self. I can be neutral. I can be a little bit in my authentic self, a little bit in the ego. So it's like a dial. Now we look at so when we are in our authentic self, we're connected, we're calm, we're patient. And that's really where we want to be. And so if you look at what some of the people say, empathetic, trusting, those are all authentic self-based actions. Emotional intelligence, accessible, supportive, communicate effectively, give credit, empower, listen, care, lead by example, lead with love, mentor, encourage, and concern. Those are all authentic self-based behaviors. You can't do any of them when you're trying to protect yourself. So look, honestly, the whole key to life, much less leadership, is understanding and recognizing when you're in your ego and then shifting to your authentic self. And then also when you're dealing with other people, understanding when they're in their ego and helping them move to their authentic self. Because when you sit down with somebody, whether it's somebody that works for you, whether it's a client, and they're in their ego, they perceive they have to protect themselves, you're not going to have a productive conversation. So what great leadership is one, is understanding, am I in my ego or not? If I am in my ego, why am I in my ego? The great thing is often just by having the realization that just by asking yourself, the act of observation, 95% of the time will at least pop you to neutral, if not into your authentic self. The easiest hack that I can give you today is anytime you're going into a call, a meeting, or you're in the middle of a situation, just ask yourself, oh my gosh, right now, am I in my ego? And if you're in your ego, this is a great question to ask yourself right now. When you're in your ego, what's your physiological response to that? How does that feel in your body? Because when you can identify that, then you can know. For me, I get tight here. I can get really tight here, and it feels like hot and warm, or I disconnect. It's like I feel a bit lightheaded. That's how I know that I'm in my ego. And so if you're going to get on like a phone call and you're like, oh, this client often can be a bit intimidating or a bit rude. And I'm like, am I in my ego right now? And then maybe you are in your ego, but just by asking that, maybe you'll get to neutral because you observe. And then you're like, well, how can I be in my authentic self right now? And then just that intention will put you into your authentic self. Because people pick up, even if we try not to look like our ego, people have great intuition. We need this intuition because, again, if I meet somebody else, 1,000 years ago, if I meet somebody else in the forest, I had to know what they're, whether they're, going to attack or not attack. So we have really great intuition when other people are in their ego. And when somebody's in their authentic self and somebody else is in their ego, they're going to try to either bring down or bring up. And so if you can be strong in your authentic self and they're in their ego, oftentimes you can bring them up to the authentic self. But if you're not ready for that, then they'll go down to the ego. So when you enter any conversation and you're defensive or trying to protect yourself or on the offensive, that's not going to be a great conversation. But when you are in your authentic self, then, and even if you perceive the other person's in their ego, oftentimes you can change how you interact with them. Hey, what's wrong? Hey, I notice you, can we slow down? Can I answer any questions for you? There's a lot you can do to help move them lessen their ego or even get in their authentic self. And that's great leadership. That's really what great leaders do, is have that realization. Because look, we all move into our ego many times a day. If you don't think you move into your ego, you can put your hand up. We'll put you one-on-one with me, and we'll go through every place in your life until we find. No, I'm just joking. But it's human. We're humans. We're going to do that. So it's not about never going into our ego. It's about being compassionate with ourselves when we are, and just shifting out. That's the quickest way you're going to shift out. But when we can start having awareness to this, then we can really go through this. So before we go into the breakout, I just have my questions for you are: when do you go into your ego? When do you go into your ego? Is there a specific client that brings that triggers you and you go into your ego? Is there a specific situation? Like every time my accountant calls, I don't like numbers, and then I get into my ego. Is it when problems come to you, you're in your ego? Is it looking at the financials? Is it when you deal with HR problems, those type of things? Yeah, Philip. So you put, when I feel the need to be defensive. When do you feel the need to be defensive? That's the question you want to ask yourself. Is there a pattern? And so when you can realize that, then you can do that. And then think about how your behavior changes. Some people get very controlling. Some people get angry. Some people withdraw. So Fiona, technology brings you to that. So, and now think about other people in your life. Think about other people you work with clients, whoever it is. Do you ever, now that you know about this, just think about your last couple of conversations. Has anybody shifted into their ego during the conversation? Do people seem in their ego at different times? And then knowing that they have some sort of fear, need to protect themselves, how can you change how you have the conversation with them? Chasing debts. It's good. Being overwhelmed. Yeah. And when David, clients being annoying. I get that. But when they are annoying, you can stay in your authentic self. They're going to be less annoying for less time. And then you can be more of a trusted advisor. A good way to diffuse someone is ask for their advice. That's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. So, Peter, I think we're going to go into a breakout room. Is that right?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much indeed for that, Michael. Let's unspotlight. Thank you very much indeed for